Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I have four significant concerns in reference to the developer's assessments on the impact of proposed wind turbines. My concerns are pre-survey consultation, the design of the survey work, and the bird collision risk assessment. That's birds hitting turbines. Now, next slide. This is an approximate map of migrations. I hope you can see the green lines at the back there, but we've got a series of green lines here indicating migration routes up to various points on our coast, and that's a diagrammatic representation of where we think most of our passerine land bird migration goes backwards and forwards across to the nearest point, Cherbourg Peninsula. We've also got up here an east-west migration, west-east. Both of these obviously are different directions in spring and autumn. More significantly perhaps, this is Alderney. We have a very large gannet, that big white seabird. Here, believe it or not, they fly all the way up to that site to forage and feed, 80 miles. So that puts it in the context of, we're at a crossroads there of migration. Okay, now, it's a requirement for the development consultants to assess the risk for birds, plus possible collision impacts for the turbines, plus the displacement of birds from an area. If they're on the water, put a wind farm there, or you can pile it and move somewhere else, we displace them. Okay? Now, firstly, I'm going to talk about the pre-survey consultation. Now, this aspect sounds rather boring. It's terribly important. If you regard a bird investigation like this, it's a scientific investigation. The first thing you do in a scientific investigation is you assemble all the information you can lay your hands on, publish work, and not least of all, you engage with local groups. You meet them, you talk with them, and you involve them. Very important. Most important consultation goes on. And this is the essence. With that information and national information, consultation, references to books, you then come up with what we call a desk study. Next slide. Now, the desk study will push you in a number of directions. First of all, survey design. Now, I've done many surveys for geology and geophysics. That's my profession, or was. When it comes to birds, you've got complex patterns. Birds do not obey a particular day when they're going to migrate, or a particular time, or a particular species. You can go to Hengistbury Head one day, and you'll see nothing. 2 hours later you can go, and the place is alive. So we really, only with surveys, get a snapshot of what's happening. The next thing is, I live in Christchurch Harbour. We're in Christchurch, and I've spent 30 years in the harbour in Hengistbury Head looking at birds. And basically, we have a local bird group, CHOG, Christchurch Harbour Ornithological Group, publishes a daily website. Just put COG birds on your Google and you'll get today's birds, who's seen what and where. Now, that's assimilated every year into a bird report, 80 or 90 pages. There are 50 years of those reports, 50 years of assimilated information. Also, there's a bird ringing station. And you know, with bird ringing, we put rings on their legs, we trap them humanely, we release them. Now, just in that area, near Hengistbury Head, the CHOG ringing boys, by the end of 2012, had ringed 56,500 birds. It's a heck of a lot of birds. Now, that's pretty critical information. And if I was a developer or a consultant, I would have made CHOG the first port of call. Hengistbury Head, local area, lots of data. I'd have made the first port of call. So it didn't appear to be that way. So our group asked the developer what contacts had been made with CHOG. We received a very short reply. 4 meetings /calls /consultations /responses have been held with / received from CHOG. We tried to break that down. I'm told by CHOG, and I'm not speaking on behalf of CHOG, I'm speaking as a personal bird watcher. The facts are there were 2 phone discussions, no face-to-face meetings, and a couple of letters to the developer from CHOG. Now you can buy that 50 years of data on a CD for 15 quid. They said they would buy it, apparently they never did. I was so horrified after the surveys had finished that I talked to the consultants at PMMS in Romsey, and I gave them my own copies of 2009, 2010, 2011, because I really believed it was important. They tried to understand just what was going on. Now, on consultation, it appears the developer only consults statutory-wise with two groups, RSPB and Natural England. Now, they're both renowned organisations, but I see one slight problem. Their officers are not on the ground. The RSPB officer is located in Exeter. No disrespect to him, he's a good chap, but it is a point. We do need people on the ground who know the birds and know the area. We'll come on to survey design. Now, the developer basically considers 3 issues. The disturbance or displacement of foraging seabirds, like the gannet, coming in, feeding, or sitting on the water, resting there. Okay? Collision of individual seabirds and migrating birds with the turbines. Mortalities. 3, impacts on bird populations listed as features of national and international designated sites. Now, the developer looked at 11 key seabirds, 4 species of passage seabirds, and 10 other species. And basically, of all that lot, I think only 1, or maybe 2, certainly 1, was the rather secretive nocturnal nightjar, coming in later. Now, all observations were dawn to dusk. Birds migrate at night. I know, I live near a river and I hear them coming over. I hear the whimperwills in the spring and I hear the geese in the winter. They do that. So I'm concerned that basically on the survey design there's been no consideration of things such as the really complex nature of the migration at these crossroads. Storm-driven birds. Wind turbines can operate 45 miles an hour, something like that, easily. If you start blowing small birds around in that, what's going to happen to them? Nighttime migration, I've already mentioned. Now, my estimate is that there's a migration of over 70 different land species from on land across the continent. There's actually a lot more, but I'll call it 70. Right? There are things like pivets, finches, thrushes, wading birds, birds of prey, and things like that. Now, that really, a survey should take account of them. They're terribly important. Last but not least is the weather. And the weather can be a very difficult factor. You can plan a survey, go out the next day, and the weather's bad, and nothing. So weather plays a part. Here we've got survey work. Now, in their published document, which is the Preliminary Environmental Information, PEI 3 of last September, no information is given on actual time spent on survey. Now, I regard that as a fundamental number. How much time did you spend out there? So we, our little group, wrote to the developer, and he very kindly replied and said, 2 years of bird surveys have been carried out on a monthly basis from December 2009 to November 2011. They supplied data. Now, they did a number of surveys. They did airborne, looking from aeroplanes and filming from aeroplanes. They did lots of boat surveys, going up and down, measuring the birds they saw. They also had land-based observers. Unfortunately, only 3. One was sitting out on the Isle of Wight, St Catherine's Point. Another one was at Hurst Spit, and the other one was ways away at Portland Bill. Nothing at Hengersbury, nothing at Durlster. However, that was it. If we look at the data we find just 6 airborne surveys in the whole period. Boat surveys, no boat surveys in February 2010 and October 2010. Observer land-based surveys, they didn't do any in 2010. Just didn't happen, or at least we don't have the information. I've summarised it here. Also no nocturnals, which we're going to discuss. But they did say monthly. Right. Now, I don't think that's adequate to really assess an area out there with this complex migration pattern and really come up with a true assessment of the number of birds passing through there or wintering out there or whatever. Now, I'm concerned that, and I'll go back to it again, nighttime observations. Now, if you study the literature and you talk to people on the continent, you will find that there are several nocturnal observation techniques. There's vertical looking radar. You can identify blocks of species. You don't know what they are, you can get their heights. You can have thermal imaging cameras, rather like the police, that sort of thing. Or you can have infrared binoculars. Now, the developer considered 2 of these techniques, and he just says on radar, the potential use of radar has been considered, however, following discussions with Natural England, it was discounted. On the use of thermal imaging cameras, the developer advises it was discussed but dismissed due to health and safety reasons. I don't know what they are because it's a passive system. You actually look at something and you measure it. It's not shooting and you're not shooting. So we'll have to live on that. So basically, we're stuck with daytime measurements. Now, fourthly, all the observations analysis concern with seabirds. And we end up with preliminary findings. Now, this is the preliminary environmental assessment, and this was last autumn. It says overall abundance of birds within and through the proposed wind park is considered low. Moreover, no nationally important numbers occur, although regionally important numbers of guillemots and razorbills have been recorded during migration periods. Next slide. As a guillemot, they breed in some quantity on the cliffs around here. They spend a lot of their time in the water, and they do fly low, probably beneath the blades of the turbine, under them. Next one. Razorbills are similar, but not many breeding species or numbers around here. Next one. Then we have the sort of birds which arrive on our coast. This is the wheating. A very white tail, you can't miss him, you'll see him on the head, you'll see him on the cliffs here, and all along this coast. They're arriving now. Next. And you'll see the swallows. Lawrence can have a quick word to say on the swallows.
I have sailed these waters for many years, which have witnessing many birds at sea. A recent experience on the 22nd of September last year, thousands of swallows left our shores on their annual migration to Africa. Hengistbury Head Shop recorded 40,000 that day. They were also reported leaving Durlston and the Isle of Wight, so probably 80,000 left that day. There are no swallows mentioned in the developer's bird survey. Well, we have the linnet up there. No, sorry, the meadow pipit, sorry. Another recent event witnessed in March this year at Keyhaven was the arrival of hundreds of these meadow pipits arriving back from Spain, absolutely flopping down in exhaustion when they reached our shores. These are birds of our favourite host of the cuckoo. So we don't want to lose the cuckoo, do we? There are no meadow pipits mentioned in the developer's survey.
Excellent. Right, here we have some visitor, Sedgewater. This little chap weighs about 15 to 20 grams, not much more than half an ounce. You'll see him in the reed beds accumulating down near Hengistbury, and I think by the end of the year ending 2012, I think Chelgard ring 330 of these just that year. And these little fellas disappear, off they go to the continent. We're not sure their routes. We know they end up in France and Spain, but I question if these birds are flying out of Hengistbury, they're going to be facing turbines with an area of capture, if you like, of the order of 6 acres each. Now, what is the probability of them going through there and being hit? And the answer is, I don't know. I have no idea. And that has not been considered in terms of that. Now, we do have one migrating land bird, next slide, which you may all have heard of. He's called the nightjar. The night pick gives it away, it's nocturnal. You can hear them burrowing away on the heaths around here. You rarely see them. This was one on Hengistbury Head last year. One of the job photographers got hold of it. Now, the developer didn't include this in his original surveys. I think Natural England asked him about it belatedly, and he said he would look into it. However, to obtain an estimate of the numbers passing through the wind farm site, the developer assumes that 9,200 nightjars migrate from southern England across the Channel, and that may well be a good figure. It sounds reasonable. But they didn't see any, and they weren't observing them, and you probably wouldn't because they fly at night. However, they conclude that 400 H2 nightjars will pass through the site. But their estimates of collision are that none will be affected. That is their conclusion. I'm not going to comment any more on it. Now, that's all without field observations. Now, if we come to collision risk assessment, next thing, we're in the realms of mathematical modelling. I can see everybody going to sleep. Okay. What you have to try and do is work out the populations of birds going through the area, where they're either on the water or they're migrating north-south, east-west, and you've got to get an estimate of the numbers of each species. That's the first task, and they've done this. They've made their estimates. The next thing is you estimate how many you think will go through the turbine area, through the site. And there are empirical relationships for this, that's all I'll call them. The next thing is, what is the chance of collision or avoiding collision? And the typical mathematical values attributed to this are between 98 and 99.5% avoidance. They're empirical, and that's what's been used. So we end up with that particular estimate. Now, I've looked in vain in the PEI3. I wanted to know the total number of birds which would be hit in a year in the prospective wind farm. I think that's a pretty interesting figure. I couldn't find it. There's a myriad of tables, and I'd love to get more input to it. Maybe when the planning report comes out, we'll get an idea of their actual values. I make it 840 birds a year of various species, 17 species. Oh, sorry, 19. Now that's my best estimate from their data. If I'm wrong, I'd be glad to hear from them, but it's not published. Now this seems small. I can see you saying, well, that's a couple of birds a day, so what? Well, is it realistic? Do we know? Those are the questions. Have we done enough work? That's the question. Now, if you go through the literature of bird migration, it's huge. But there's a very interesting instrumented tower, which is a meteorological tower, rather one like was planned for out of here, not permission, but apparently didn't get built. And in the German Bight, 30 miles offshore, they instrumented it with radar, infrared, video, microphones, and over 14 months got an incredible amount of information. They also found on the platform 442 dead birds over that period. Now, I have to caution that because it was a lit platform, and there will be some attraction, quite a bit of attraction, towards a lit platform. But what lights are going to be put on the wind turbines out here? There's got to be something. And it's interesting to see just what happens. But that's a magnitude of one of the few things I've been able to find. And remember, I've gone through the literature, and you think scientifically, if you speculate that this is the number of bird collisions on a wind farm and it's built, somebody really ought to instrument that wind farm with cameras. It's quite expensive, and really try to get a figure, because you won't pick up the birds unless they're on the platform. They'll be in the water and gone. And we haven't done that. That's not been done. There's plans to do it. Now I say that's a lack of validation. There just isn't anything to justify these formulas. Mathematically they look wonderful, but are they realistic? And I have my doubts, empirically.
They haven't recorded any land-based migrating birds. So I think we know there's thousands leaving the south coast here, so they're going to be going through it.
Can I just give one last bit?
Please. Carry on, please.
Thank you. Lawrence?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's the gannet. Lawrence sees these.
Oh, yes, the gannet. These huge, beautiful seabirds with a wingspan of almost 6 feet fly from Alderney to feed pacifically in the waters off Cherbourg and the Needles. You can be seeing them here all of the year. If they are following shoals of fish as they dive, they're about 30 metres in a frenzy, like headless chicken. They will follow these shoals into the wind farm. If they follow the shoals into the wind farm, they will be headless as well.
Next one.
Right.
This is a final little case history, a cautionary tale. This is the white-throated needle-tailed swift. And none of you will have seen it unless you've been out in Asia, because it's only been recorded 9 times in the UK. But last year, in June, a group of bird watchers followed one up all the way to the Outer Hebrides, the island of Harris, and spent hours watching this delightful creature, as they had one chance to see it. So a bit of a medal for them. And as they watched, this bird flew straight into the turbine and was killed. And they recovered the body. Now, what's interesting, we have a look at the turbine. Solitary turbine, about 55 metres, I think, high, sitting out there. It managed to collide with that. What's interesting about this bird, it's the fastest flying bird in the world in level flight. Still got hit. Still managed to get hit by a turbine. Now, I asked the question, if it had not been a needle-tailed swift, people wouldn't have been interested. If it was an ordinary swallow or a swift, we wouldn't have known. So the real problem we've got is we really don't know about migration. And I think we've got to find a better way. Instrumented towers, joint bird and meteorological towers may be the answer. They're expensive, but I think they'll give us some form of insight into migration. Thank you.
Thank you.